Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call it the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum. In the podcast where I invite my guests to come on, talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collate their fantasy festivals, which I have christened a Fantastival. We're now on episode number 116, mid-January, so I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone's not too cold. It's been very cold recently, so I hope everyone's wrapped up warm and is making the best of what they have. Massive thank you to Dean Dovey, who was my guest in episode 115, and please go and check out his album Journey to the Sun. That is an absolutely phenomenal album. If you like The Verve or Richard Ashcroft, you will absolutely love that album. So please go back into the vaults and give that one a listen if you haven't done so already. So that was episode 115. This is 116, and I'm delighted to have on this week, formerly of the Dead 60s and the Specials, and now the purveyor of Scally Folk, which we're going to talk all about later. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the one and only Mr Matt McManamon.
Hey, how are you doing, Steve?
Matt, thank you for joining me. I've been so looking forward to talking to you. Ronan McManus has recommended you. I spoke to Ian from Fretsaw, and they were like, you have to get Matt on the podcast. So I'm so glad we've made this happen. I'm looking forward to hearing all about Scally Folk and all about your musical taste and your experiences and your fantasy festival. But before we do that, Matt, I always like to check in, ask my guests how they're doing, how they've been from a mental health perspective. So to open up, Matt, how are you, mate?
Yeah, you know, very well. All good here. Kind of pleased to report that musically, you know, quite busy. Got a lot of things kind of coming up. Got stuff kind of bubbling away in the background, stuff in the pipeline. A few irons in the fire, so to speak. And I mean, I guess that's always good for a working musician to be busy. Do you know what I mean? So no, yeah, I'm happy. Got, yeah, like I said, some stuff coming up. Got some stuff in the background. So yeah, all good.
And how did you get into music, Matt? Let me take you back to where it first began. What got you into music?
I guess, you know, I was kind of around sort of 11, 12 years of age, you know, kind of when you first start going to secondary school. And, you know, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from Liverpool, you know, even though I don't live there now, and I haven't lived there for many years, but I'm sure we'll touch on that again further in. But yeah, I had three older brothers, and they were all heavily into music, and they all kind of listened to stuff from, you know, anything from like kind of Iron Maiden, AC/DC, you know, down to like Dire Straits, Fleetwood Mac, you know, like reggae stuff. I remember Bob Marley being played, the Specials, this kind of stuff. So all that kind of filtered down to me. And then as I kind of got a little bit older, kind of into my teenage years, you know, I was just like, I'm loving all this music. I'd started to kind of learn a bit of guitar through an uncle of mine who was a very talented banjo player, actually, doing traditional Irish stuff. You know, he was on the Liverpool Irish scene and that kind of thing. And it all just kind of began from there, really. And as I managed to kind of learn how to play a couple of chords, it just sort of started coming to me, and I was getting interested in music, writing songs, even at that young age, even though they were very bad songs. But I was having a go. I was having a go, and it just kind of developed from there. And then as I entered into secondary school in Liverpool, that was when I first met a guy called Charlie Turner, who is and was the bass player in the Dead 60s. And we kind of, you know, formed a friendship through our love of music and love of attempting to play our guitars. And we used to just kind of like thrash it out and just kind of, you know, kind of try and egg each other on type things to do music. And it sort of developed from there and just went on then leaps and bounds.
And then obviously that friendship develops into Pinhole, because I've done my research. So right? Yeah, well, there was actually a band before that, believe it or not, a band called Rest Home, which was, I mean, I was like 14. A couple of the other boys in that band, they were like a couple of years older, like they were like 2 years older. But like, you know, when you're 14 and someone's 17, that is kind of like, you know, a little bit of a gap. But no, we had this band on the go for about a year, which was called Rest Home, which was like this kind of full-on kind of punk band, basically, kind of pop punky band. And that was my first introduction into like playing live music and doing gigs and stuff like that. And then from that, we ended up then forming Pinhole, which did then get a little bit of kind of, you know, a bit of traction and a bit of success, albeit kind of, you know, slightly kind of small time. But it was
the beginnings of the road to where I was travelling down to get to, you know.
And that was still quite a fairly young age, right? So at this time you must be taking in even more music, more influences, learning how to play live, I guess learning a bit about the industry. And in Pinhole, I guess, morphs into the Dead 60s, which become a quite big band.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, because in Pinhole, I always kind of describe that as like to use a kind of an Americanism, if you will. It's like I always used to describe that as like my high school band.
Right,
do you know what I mean? Like not that I really kind of spent much time in school anyway, because I dropped out when I was 15. Do you know what I mean? But you get what I'm trying to say. And that was almost kind of like, earning our stripes type thing. Do you know what I mean? And we were lucky enough that we did get popular around Liverpool, and we did tour. We did 2 kind of quite big tours on our own around the UK, and we were starting to kind of gain a bit of a following, you know, and things like John Peel picked up on us, and we actually were invited in to do a John Peel session in the famous Maida Vale studios down in London, which, you know, anyone who's a musician or anyone who knows about music knows that that's quite a kind of big deal to be invited in to go and play a John Peel session on the radio. Do you know what I mean? And bits and bobs are happening, and we did end up, we released, God, if my memory serves me right, it was 1 EP, definitely an EP, a 4-track EP, and then we did, I think, a double A side then. So we had managed to kind of get funding and sort of picked up by little independent labels that would sort of throw us a few quid to go and record and distribute some records. They weren't even records then, it was CDs. So we did manage to kind of gain a bit of traction and get going. But, you know, we were very, very young. You know, we were still teenagers when all that was going on. So then as we kind of came out of our teens and, if you like, grew to be men, you know what I mean? It was... we had just kind of we'd matured. We were starting to mature. Then our musical tastes had started to mature. Mine certainly had, and the style of music we were playing, which was very much along the lines of pop punk, which that is a very relevant word that I'm saying right now. As this podcast develops, you'll see where I'm going with this. That was kind of like the first love, that style of like American kind of pop punk. Very, you know, West Coast California. That's what we were doing at the time. And then we just kind of matured into doing, I guess you would say, a bit more kind of a British sound, which so then that as we kind of dissolved the band and got more interested in, if you like, the British side of punk, the punk sound, which then led on to sort of like Jamaican stuff and ska and reggae, that all morphed into the Dead 60s. The Dead 60s were born, and quite quickly it sort of took off after that, really.
And were you surprised, I guess, to the extent of how well the Dead 60s done? Because, again, I went back and listened to the Dead 60s album. It's a great album as well. It still holds up and still feels quite relevant, a lot of the content. And it's, you know, still quite angry. And like you said, you can hear the Britishness, but you can hear outside influences as well. And obviously Riot Radio, which we spoke about earlier before we started recording, that was massive, right? So when I went and listened back to Riot Radio, I was like, of course, everyone knows this song, or I know this. So I guess tell us about that time in the Dead 60s, and I guess from recording the self-titled album and Riot Radio, it must have been a hell of a, 6 months to a year that all kind of happened.
Yeah, because, I mean, when all that was kind of going off, we'd formed the Dead 60s, and we'd, written the whole sort of collection of songs, which for Riot Radio was part of that. Obviously, then we got signed straight away to Delta Sonic Records, which then became a subsidiary of Sony, and we did eventually then it was kind of like a 2-tier deal. So Delta Sonic was kind of like the indie label who were funded by Sony, and then the second tier was you'd go straight to Sony. So we eventually did go straight to Sony and were just on a major label. So all this was kind of happening. We were in the studio in Liverpool. We did do a few bits and pieces in London in recording studios, but in all honesty, at that time, none of us particularly liked London, and it was like, what are we doing in London? It's fucking weird round here, man. Do you know what I mean? We need to get back to Liverpool. Do you know what I mean? We're just like, 4 lads who had never really been anywhere ever apart from Liverpool, sort of thing. And then, we recorded the album. We released, I think we did 2 singles before Riot Radio. I think Riot Radio was the 3rd single, but the first 2 singles kind of came out, and they were received really well. by fans, by punters, by, other sort of like music industry people. The press picked up on it, they really liked it. And then the radio started picking up on us, and then we dropped Riot Radio, and that just kind of just sort of launched us then. And then all of a sudden, it was getting played on radio, people were writing about us, the gigs were getting bigger, we were starting to sell out venues and stuff like that, and people were just generally sort of talking about us, and there was a buzz, and Liverpool had already kind of took to us because we were a Liverpool, Scouse band. So then when all that kind of kicked off, then all of a sudden we find ourselves basically in America all the time, and a big, huge American management company took us on, which was a bit mad. And that was it. The company was called Q Prime, and the guy who was like the MD, if you like, a guy called Peter Mensch, he started managing us. Now he had on his books the likes of Red Hot Chili Peppers, Metallica,
wow,
Def Leppard, Smashing Pumpkins. He had like Hole, Courtney Love, and at one point he was managing Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin and all that, and there's definitely more that I can't remember that were big names. So we were just a bit like, wow, like this guy wants to like sign us up and take us on. And I remember thinking I wasn't sure if we were suited to that management company, just because the kind of acts that they had were these huge, massive, like stadium bands, and then he wanted to pick up on us who were like these kind of like these four young guys from Liverpool, sort of thing. And you kind of think, are we kind of our depth here? But then at the end of the day, you just kind of go, look, is this ever going to happen again? Like, you got to just go for it. So we went for it and signed up with him, and he took us on. And he just, we were in America an awful lot, but we did well in America. I mean, at one stage we were much, much bigger in America than we were in the UK or anywhere else, which was kind of a bit mental, So it was kind of one of them, like, it's kind of, let's ride it till the wheels fall off, let's see what happens.
And in terms of the wheels falling off, was it, obviously, Dead 60s comes to an end, was that kind of just too young almost, to put a pun on it?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, and in some ways, I still feel there was kind of unfinished business there, because what happened was we'd done the first album, was received, well, and, it went on to sell 100,000 copies, which I was fucking delighted with. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
If you sold that today, Matt, you'd easily have a number one album on your hands, like easy. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. But back then, people were selling more like 500,000 to 1 million to get to number one. Yeah. So in some ways, we were kind of. No, I don't think this, but like we were in the eyes of the industry, we were kind of perceived as underachievers in a weird way. But like anyhow, so we managed to shift 100,000 copies, which was great. Went round the world, toured, TV shows, Top of the Pops, front covers of magazines, all this kind of stuff. And then we came to doing the second album, which we went off and we did that in New York. We got sent. I say got sent. It sounds like I was like sent away to prison or something. They suggested we go to New York and do it. Sound. I'm not going to turn that down. We kind of decamped to New York for like 3 or 4 months. We did the second album, which I still think I really like that album. I think we've done a good job on that. And kind of just to sort of kind of get to the whole point of the story is then we ended up kind of delivering the album to Sony as it was at the time, and they were just kind of like, no, I don't think we're going to do this sort of thing. They just kind of got cold feet or whatever, pulling the plug. They did release one single. We did one single off it, which was our worst ever charting single, and it was just kind of, sort of the ship was sinking sort of thing, and we were just basically let go. We were dropped, and then when you dropped, everything else kind of follows suit. Like the management's left, the agent left, anyone who was associated with our kind of infrastructure of the band left, and it was just kind of like we were, just basically on a sinking ship, like I said there. And so when that all happened, it's quite hard. It's kind of a bitter pill to swallow. And we just got to the stage where it was like, you know what, this is kind of not fun at all anymore. Everybody's jumped ship. Let's just knock it on the head and call it a day. So not to make you feel too old, but there's obviously in a couple of years or so, like a 20th anniversary, right, of this coming up, because we're now in 2023 by the time. Yeah. So I guess never say never, Matt. You said you might have unfinished. You feel like there's unfinished business. Could that ever happen?
Yeah, like I always felt there was unfinished business with this band because I just didn't feel that we got to our full potential. We became close, and then, like I said, that kind of the rug was pulled from us, and I felt, no, and I actually, it's funny. I was aware that the 20th anniversary was kind of coming up. And I'm definitely one of these guys. I'm like, never say never. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying we're suddenly going to reform and start, writing and recording and releasing albums again. But you never know. So a couple of gigs might be nice if all the stars align and all that kind of thing. But definitely something to think about.
Yeah, you never know what the future holds. So we'll see what happens with that. Fingers crossed. So I'm obviously going to talk to you about Scally Folk. Before I do, I really have to talk about the specials. So
yeah.
I mean, how did that come about? Was that just the direct follow-on in from Dead 60?
Yeah, well, you see, we as the band, the Dead 60s, we knew Terry Hall, who, as I'm sure you were, sadly passed recently, which is quite a shock, actually. But I guess that's life. We had been involved with Fred Perry. The clothing label, the fashion label, and we were invited. This was probably 2006, maybe 2007, around that time. We were invited to do this Fred Perry kind of sponsored night in the 100 Club, the famous 100 Club in London. We were playing, and Terry Hall was going to DJ with Don Letts. He was DJing as well. Another, really kind of total cool, famous figure, And that's how we first met him, and he actually got up with us on stage, and we done a couple of special songs as the encore, which was kind of one of the first times he'd sang any special songs in many, many years. So that's where the connection was made with Terry. And then kind of fast forward then, about a year after that, that's when the Dead 60s split up. And then I was kind of not doing a whole lot. I'd moved back to Ireland, where I live. I live in Ireland, on the west coast of Ireland, and kind of came back to the motherland, so to speak, Liverpool Irish. And I wasn't really doing a whole lot. I was kind of licking my wounds a bit, kind of going to the pub, that kind of thing. hanging around, telling a few stories. I mean, I was still doing a few bits and bobs kind of behind the scenes, but I always kind of say it was like I wasn't actually doing music professionally, but I was still keeping my hand in, and I was kind of like, at the time I was a bit like, what am I doing, what am I not doing, this kind of thing. And I literally got a call out of the blue from a guy called Steve Blackwell, who was the specials manager, and he rang me up and he said, just wondering, would you be interested in coming to do some shows with us? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, where's this kind of coming from? And he goes, oh, Terry told me to ring you, but I'm his manager, so I'm going to speak to you. And I was like, okay, yeah, so what's the deal? And he was like, can you come and play lead guitar? And the next gig is the Isle of Wight Festival. We're second to top.
Wow.
Red Hot Chili Peppers are headlining, and we're on before them. And I was like, right, it's okay. Yeah. And I was like, and at one stage, I was kind of going, is this for real? Like, is this a wind-up?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? What's going on here? Someone's having a laugh here. And he's like, no, I assure you, it's, I am who I am. Terry asked me, blah, blah, blah. And he said, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, go on then. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, let me think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I'll give it a go. Like, same thing. But I must say, as a little side note there, anybody who knows me knows, like I was drafted in to play lead guitar because Roddy, the original lead guitarist, he had left the group and gone and done his solo thing. So they need a lead guitarist. And anybody who knows me or is aware of me will tell you, I can't play lead guitar. I swear down, I cannot play guitar, lead guitar. I can play guitar. In fact, I'm a pretty good rhythm guitarist, but I'm a rhythm guitarist. So I was like, oh my God, but I didn't let them know that. I was like, yeah, I can do lead guitar, no problem. Where they were signed, you know what I mean? So that all kind of went down. And the best thing then about that was this was I remember he rang me on a Friday afternoon. He said, can you come to London on Monday? And I said, yeah, okay. And he said, look, we'll book you your flights, all this kind of stuff. We'll give you a hotel. And he said, why don't you come over, meet the band, have a bit of a meeting, blah, 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 and discuss what we're going to do. And I said, sound, yeah. And then he went to me, will you bring your guitar? So I started panicking immediately. I was like, why? What are you on about? Why do we need to bring the guitar? I thought we were just having a chat. And he goes, no, we might get together and play a few tunes. And I said, okay, that makes sense, yeah. And I was saying, well, what tunes do you want me to learn? And he was very vague, and he was kind of like swerving the question. And he's going, anything will do, anything by the guys, and any special songs. And I was like, no, what do you want me to learn? What do you want me to learn? And he's like, anything. So I'm like freaked out now, because I'm like, what are they going to ask me to play? Bear in mind, I cannot play lead guitar. So from Friday night till Monday morning till I got my flight, I spent the whole weekend, basically stayed up for the whole weekend trying to learn every special song and every lead guitar part. I managed to get down. I figured that they were going to say, well, let's do Rudy, Message to You, Rudy, and let's do Ghost Town. Yeah. I figured they're going to ask for them. So I said, if I can nail two, then I can show that I can do it. But if they'd asked me for anything else, it would have been absolutely diabolical. I mean, it would have been out there. They wouldn't have even. So anyway, then kind of fast forward to the Monday. I get to Brad's house, the drummer, who again, he sadly passed away now. That's where the meeting was in London, in St John's Wood, I think it was. And I get there, nobody's there apart from him. It's his house, like his own house. So I'm ringing on his buzzer. He buzzes me in, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Matt, nice to meet you, blah blah blah. Yeah, we're going to have a nice chat." And I'm walking in with my guitar, and he looks down at me, and he's like looking me up and down, and I'm like, what? He goes, what have you got there? And I said, it's got my guitar. And he goes, what you bring that for? And I said, I thought we were going to have a jam or like an audition or whatever, or I'm going to play. He goes, no, you don't need to bring that. He goes, no, you've got the job. We just want to chat with you. Well, the relief that just lifted off me. I was like, yes, I don't have to play anything right now because I can't play it anyway. But I was stressed, man. I was freaked out, like, you know what I mean? It was just, well, yeah, that was just a lovely moment, really. And yeah, they just kind of said, yeah, like we know who you are, we know what you're about. Come and do this gig. We did the Isle of Wight Festival, the first ever gig with them, which was, I think it was like 40 or 50,000 people. And bearing in mind at this stage, at this point, I hadn't actually been on stage properly for around 4 years, maybe 5 years. So I was like, my first gig back in sort of the public eye. Yeah. I'm playing lead guitar, that I can't do, with the Specials, a band that I absolutely love. Second to top, only below the Red Hot Chili Peppers, main stage, Isle of Wight Festival, 50,000 people. Yeah, let's go, man. Do you know what I mean? It's like some baptism of fire, that one.
Oh, mate, you must have been like a kid in a candy store playing with like a band. You can clearly hear the effect of the Specials on you in the Dead 60s. Yeah. Like that, you can clearly hear that. So you must have just been in your element playing those songs.
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, I actually owe a lot to them because the Dead 60s would never have been a band without the influence of the Specials. And then my time with the Specials, which I got to kind of play with them for it's around as a touring guitarist, and we got to mainly festivals, but we toured like South America and stuff like that, and yeah, like festivals and stuff like that. If it wasn't for that, I kind of refound my confidence from playing with them. So that's kind of twice that they've done me. So the first time was if it wasn't for them, the Dead 60s wouldn't have happened. And if it wasn't for me getting to play with them as their touring lead guitarist, I don't think I would have found the confidence to go on to do my solo stuff and do the whole Scally Folk thing. So they've kind of twice now, they've been a massive influence. So yeah, it's just brilliant.
Oh, brilliant stuff. And you mentioned your Scally Folk stuff. So in 2021, I keep saying last year, but it's not now. It's obviously 2021. You released Scally Folk, which is obviously a very different sound to Dead 60s and to Pinhole, obviously, because it's not American. Yeah. So, I mean, is Scally Folk just a culmination of what you've learned musically over the last couple of years? And obviously you get older and you might tone it down and musical taste change. So I guess where's Scally Folk come from?
Well, I was always interested in... I used to call it like my guilty pleasure. I was always into sort of like Irish folk music from my Irish background, and the likes of sort of Luke Kelly, Christy Moore, Shane McGowan, Horselips, all these kind of like stuff that kind of weren't cool to say that you were into, in a weird way, especially when I was doing the Dead 60s stuff, because when you're kind of pigeonholed, when you're doing like ska, reggae, you know, punk, dub, that kind of thing. But I was always interested in that kind of stuff. And like I said, and as well, I was always interested in kind of like sort of Britpop stuff as well. Indie music, I guess you'd call it, that kind of guitar-y music. But, like I said, I used to call it my guilty pleasure. And then I realised as I got like a little bit older, you can knock off the guilty. You don't need to call it a guilty pleasure. It's just pleasure. But I was always interested in that kind of stuff. And I had always wanted to do something like in that style. So, you know, I finally just got to the stage where I was like, yeah, I want to do something like that, which came out as this Scally Folk album, which I have to say to you that title, Scally Folk, I can't take really any credit for that, because what happened was my drummer, Mick Cronin, great guy, he's got his own studio here in Ireland, which I recorded, and he drums on my stuff. When I first kind of emerged out at doing stuff again, people kept saying to me, people in the press and, journalists and stuff like that were trying to say to me, what are you doing? What does it sound like? And I could never give them an answer. And I was going, I don't know what it sounds like. I just really don't know. I can't really tell you. It's a bit this, it's a bit that. I couldn't put my finger on it, and I used to really struggle to give them, any kind of proper answer. And I said to Mick one day after a recording session, Mick, what do I say? I said, people keep asking me, and he goes, it's dead easy. It just sounds like Scally Folk to me. And I went, sound? We've got it? Yeah. I think that's what the sound is. And then I love the fact that the word scally is obviously it relates to, that's a word that is used a lot in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Where I was born and bred. And then folk, folk music, Irish folk, that kind of thing, also relates to the Irish side of me. So I love the way I thought that phrase perfectly described the sound, but it also perfectly described me as a Liverpool Irish man. Do you know what I mean? So I love the way kind of all tied in, and that's where it came from. That like.
And I must commend you. It's a fantastic album. You've got. I was had a few singles from it that people will know. Every Time I Close My Eyes is a great single. Jumping the Gun, but quite up tempo. And in Mulrenny Smile was a bit more downbeat. My favourite actually of the album is Meet Me by the River, which I think. I think that's an awesome tune. So it's 10 tracks, quite different. Scally Folk is a great description of it. And since then, you've gone on to release 2 more singles that are kind of in a similar vein to Scally Folk, but I guess maybe next level. So Out in the Cold and Step Into My Heart.
Yeah, well, Out of the Cold and Step Into My Heart, they were actually they were all written and recorded in the Scally Folk sessions, and they were just 2 songs that didn't make the cut. And then, as Scally Folk was released and started to get a bit of traction and this and that, people started to realise that I was kind of, back to music and I wasn't like dead or I was like, we've got to hit them with something else. And I sort of didn't want to hit them with like brand new stuff, but I had these two songs that were recorded and in the back pocket, so to speak, from the Scally Folk sessions. And I was just like, yeah, let's just get them out there and just, see what people think. And people have kind of taken to them, and they've done quite well so far. So yeah, I'm happy with that,
Oh, great. Yeah, great. Much deserved. And if anyone's listening and wants to listen to your music, Matt, where can people find your music currently?
Well, it's on all the, the major streaming sites, your Spotify's and all that kind of jazz. I do know that physical copies, as in the CDs and the vinyls, we've done some black vinyl and some limited edition blue vinyl. They are basically sold out. I think I've got 6 copies left of the vinyl. And I think there might be like 10 or 15 CDs left, something like that, which I'm going to be basically... You can get... If you want to go on Bandcamp, the Matt McManamon Bandcamp, that's kind of the place where, people go, and that's a thing where all the money goes to the artist and all that kind of thing. But I am going to kind of be selling all that stuff at the gigs, which I've got some live gigs coming up quite soon, actually. But, we're kind of down to the end of the stock, if you like. Do you know what I mean?
And my next question was going to be around live dates. I obviously follow you on social. I can see you've got quite a busy start to the year coming up. So by the time this episode goes out, you would have played last night. You would have supported the
Dancing to Architecture,
DTA, yeah.
For sure, yeah.
Which I'm sure will be a great gig, but obviously now that's in the past. But you've still got quite a lot coming up past then, right, Matt? So you're out and about, and people can come and see you if they wish.
Yeah, because basically from kind of now, most months now up until I think May, I've got stuff on. At this moment in time, I'm currently going out on my own, sort of acoustically, just because I mean, to be quite frank, financially, it doesn't make sense to bring the band out yet, the full band out. But we are gearing up to doing a full band show, which will be the first ever full band kind of Matt McManamon solo full band thing. We're gearing up to. We've got a date. I'm not going to sort of let the cat out the bag right this second, but we're looking at something in May, which will be in Liverpool to try and do the full band show. But all leading up to that, I'm going to be doing kind of solo acoustic shows, doing a few supports. You mentioned DTA, but a friend of mine called Billy Sullivan from a band called the Spitfires, who probably quite a lot of Dead 60s fans would be aware of the Spitfires, who they have just kind of disbanded and he's gone solo, but they were kind of in a similar vein to the Dead 60s, that kind of style. And just try and keep gigging as much as possible, really, leading up to this full band show, which I'm kind of like 90% certain is going to happen in May. So watch this space, watch my socials, I guess, Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff.
And you're quite easy to find right on socials. It's just literally your name. It's no like funny @. It's just a straight Matt McManamon.
Yeah, no, it's just Matt McManamon. Facebook is Matt McManamon Music, and I think Twitter's Matt McManamon Music. Bit of a tongue twister, I know, like Matt McManamon.
Lots of M's and lots of N's, but never a problem.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Well, you'll find me there, yeah.
So, Matt, I always like to ask people what they're currently listening to musically, whether it's new or old. So I've mentioned Dean Dovey at the beginning. I absolutely adore his album. He was my last guest. I'm still all over the Ryan Adams version of Nebraska by Bruce Springsteen. I'm loving that. Matt, anything you're listening to at the moment?
Yeah, listening to a few bits and pieces. I tend to listen to older stuff, to be honest, just because, I'm 40 years of age now, and I've kind of been in the music biz for quite a while, and I can be a little bit sort of, what's I'm almost like a premature grumpy old man or something, do you know what I mean? And anything new that comes, I'm like, well, we done that years ago, what are you on about? This kind of thing. They don't know what to do, and we know what we're doing, that kind of thing. But some of the kind of more recent kind of contemporary stuff I'm into. DTA, we mentioned them, Dancing to Architecture, Liverpool band, absolutely love them. They're brilliant, and I am going to be supporting them. Another label mates of mine, Mexican Dogs, they're also a Liverpool band, they're brilliant. Other stuff like Sam Fender, I particularly like him. I don't know if he's classed as kind of really new anymore, because he's sort of, been out. I really like him. And even stuff like, and again, this is another group, Sleaford Mods. I mean, they kind of still feel new to me, but I really like them, and I know they've probably been on the go for well over 10 years now, so they're not new. But but in all honesty, the last thing I was listening to was, and I bought it on vinyl just over the Christmas period there, just gone, I bought Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms. And I've been listening to that on vinyl. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, like, do you know what I mean? It's brilliant, Money for nothing, chicks for free. Do you know what a line, what a song.
Yeah, great song. Let me take you back then. Let me take you back to when you were a young lad. Probably it's around the same area that I bought my first record. Do you remember your first record and your first single and what that was?
I do remember my first record, and it was... I mean, like, I could give you the cool answer and say, like, oh yeah, it was the White Album by the Beatles, but that's a complete lie. Like, but I do remember my mother brought me down. It was my birthday, and she brought me down to Penny Lane Records in Liverpool, as in Penny Lane. Obviously the song made famous by the Beatles. There was a really, really cool record shop there. I don't think it's there anymore. But Penny Lane Records was the place to go. It was in our neighbourhood where I lived. It was my birthday, and I got some birthday money, and I went down to buy a record, and I bought the New Kids on the Block album. That was my first ever record. Yeah. And you know it's funny that sometimes, some evenings, me and my wife, like, we have these kind of like YouTube nights just me and her, like, a bottle of wine or whatever, and we listen to music on YouTube, and I always end up putting on New Kids on the Block at some point. Do you know what I mean?
That's incredible. I done for my 100th Fantastival, I had my wife on for 99, and one of my wife's picks was New Kids on the Block to actually play her fantasy festival. So she actually chose them. So a lot of love for New Kids on the Block.
That's a really good choice. That New Kids on the Block, yeah. See, I could never really throw that into the mix, so I'd be too afraid, like, in case I got slagged off or something. But when you're saying what's your first record, I think that's not a bad first record, in fairness. Like,
I think a lot of people our age that people will smile and remember that as a very popular first record to have. And like you said, and I always say on this podcast, there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure, just a pleasure. So spot on. So this podcast is all about you collating your fantasy festival. When I was doing my research, I've seen you've played some absolutely huge festivals. You've played Coachella, haven't you? Like, from what?
Coachella,
From what I read. So you've played...
In all honesty, I've kind of done every festival, at this stage. And with the Dead 60s, obviously. And the specials, we've done quite a lot of festivals with the specials, with my time with them. But, over the years, I've been at most of them, to be honest, at this stage.
Do you like festivals? Are they for you? Or some people I speak to, and a lot of bigger acts go, actually, I'm not too keen on festivals because it's you have to actually do everything so by the book. It's not as enjoyable as what it's, say a separate standard gig is.
No, I do like festivals. I very much like playing festivals. I don't like going to festivals, and I don't go to festivals unless I'm playing at them. and that's the truth. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I like the kind of being on stage, playing to a big crowd. Who doesn't like that? You know, I do like. God, I'm going to sound really bad. I do like the festival atmosphere, but I don't want to be in it. I like to be backstage and, a bit of comfort, that kind of thing. In the VIP bar, the artist bar, this kind of stuff. I like all that, where they've got nice facilities where you can actually go to the toilet in peace and have a bit of a wash and this kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Maybe sit down, have a little bit of something to eat, that kind of thing. That sounds so bad, me saying that was the truth. I'm just being honest. I do like festivals, but only when I'm sort of performing at them. I don't like being an audience member in one.
Amazing. And before we move on to your fantasy festival, I always like to ask a question on my guest. Do you have a favourite gig? That, again, this could be like you've played, like you've been to as a punter. Is there a favourite gig that you look back on and you just think, right, that was just spot on?
Yeah, I could probably give you three answers. Like with the Dead 60s, for example, I can remember that we played a festival, actually, the Rock on Seine festival in Paris, which we were really high up on the bill. We were like third to top on the main stage. There was us, there was Beck, then there was Radiohead, and it was a load of bands on before us, kind of like how I remember really were. So we were quite high up the bill. That was a really big festival for us, which was really good. Really, really enjoyed it. I love Paris anyway, and I love France, and I love the whole kind of thing. And then with the specials, remember we did like Lollapalooza. I did Lollapalooza with the Dead 60s as well, but Lollapalooza with the specials was really good in Chile. That was just mental, like 60, 70,000 Chileans going nuts to, gangsters, And there's me. And then sort of gig-wise, it wasn't so much of a festival, but I did go to see, it kind of felt like a mini festival. I went to see the Stone Roses in Marley Park in Dublin, which was just brilliant, yeah. So that was right up there, which was kind of like a mini festival, but like a one-day festival, if that makes sense. They had a load of acts on, which I didn't watch any of them because I was in the bar, because I had a VIP ticket. I leisurely strolled out to see the Stone Roses, which are a band that I never thought I'd ever get to see in my lifetime, sort of thing, because they'd split up. When they'd split up, I was too young to have seen them the first time, kind of thing, or certainly too young to have been allowed to go to a gig anyway, so I didn't think I'd get to see them, and when I did, it was just, fabulous.
Great stuff. You've mentioned some amazing stories and some amazing acts, and like I said, at the top of the podcast, this is all about getting Matt today to collate his fantasy festival. So Matt gets to choose any 5 acts, one who must play one of their studio albums in full, and Matt gets to pick an encore, which all 5 acts can perform together at the end of his fantasy festival. So very simple. 5 acts take 5 time slots. So I mentioned Dean Dovey before. He was my last guest on the podcast. In his opening act, he went for The Enemy. In his Super Seconds act, he went for Shed 7. Midway Madness, he picked The Doors. Pre-headline act, he picked The Verve, and he had them play urban hymns. And for his headline act, he picked Oasis, and he had all of those 5 acts end his fantasy festival by playing his own song, Wishing Well. So very simple, 5 acts, 5 time slots. But before we talk about your acts, Matt, we need to give your fantasy festival a name, and we need to decide where we're going to go and hold it. So Matt, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
Okay, so I'm going to call it McManifest.
Oh, I love that. I didn't see that one coming, but I love that.
Yeah.
I've got an image of like Steve McManamon, like a massive Steve McManamon poster somewhere.
Yeah. Well, obviously that's a play on words for incorporating my surname and the word festival. But yeah, I just thought that, McManifest. That sounds good to me.
That sounds good to me. You've nailed it with a name. And Matt, you can take us anywhere in the world. You can take us back to Coachella, Lollapalooza. We can go to Ireland. We can go to Liverpool. Wherever you want to go, and any venue, wherever you take us, we'll follow. So Matt, where are you going to hold McManifest?
So I want to hold it in where I am right now and where I live. I live on the west coast of Ireland in a little village called Mulranny, which is in County Mayo. And for me, I absolutely love living here. This to me is absolute paradise. Like where I live like halfway up a mountain overlooking Clew Bay, and Clew Bay then leads onto the Atlantic Ocean, and it's kind of, you look out on the Atlantic Ocean, next stop America. There's beautiful beaches. We're right on the coast. The scenery is just, to die for, and you kind of get the best of both worlds because you're by the sea, but you're like also up the mountain, out the way. So that's where I would like to hold it, here where I live.
Sounds lovely. So we are going to Ireland, Mulrenny. If I say it wrong, please let me know. Mulrenny in County Mayo.
Yeah, Mulrenny.
Mulrenny.
Yeah,
that's obviously the song on your album is obviously about where you lived in, right? Mulrenny Smile was obviously
that's my kind of ode to Mulrenny, because I mean, again, like anybody who knows me knows of my love for Ireland and for the West Coast and for County Mayo, and like the McManamons, like my clan. We come from just 2 villages up the road from where I live now, so like It's very much, and the whole Clew Bay area is where my kind of people come from, if you like. So without trying to sound sort of like too like a hippie or something, but I've always like spiritually, emotionally, mentally felt attached to this place. So yeah, it's absolutely like it's paradise for me. And just as a quick side note, they call it God's Pocket. That's the sort of nickname for the place, God's Pocket, because it's a little pocket in on the West Coast.
Oh, lovely. Sounds like a beautiful place. So we're going to hold McManifest there. So you obviously get to choose 5 acts. Any acts you want to shout out before we talk about your 5 who you love but just aren't coming with us to McManifest, who aren't going to make it in?
Yeah. There's quite a lot, and as we kind of go through this, it'll probably sort of you'll kind of understand where I'm kind of going with this. But there's so many, and I mean, I'm sure like any guests you have onto in this podcast will say the same. The list could be 1,000. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's so many, but yeah, a couple of acts or artists that I particularly love and take inspiration on who didn't make the list. The likes of, I've got like Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, The Smiths / Morrissey, Oasis, of course, The Pogues / Shane MacGowan, Stone Roses, The Lars, and then sort of touching on my Irish roots like Christy Moore, Luke Kelly, Horselips, and then we've also got to give a shout out a band that we've sort of touched on it, a band that I hold very dear in my heart, The Specials, The Clash, of course. The Clash are probably my all-time favourite band ever, and they didn't make the list. So you might think I'm mad for saying that my all-time favourite band didn't make the list, but there is, as we kind of progress through this, you'll see where I'm going. But yeah, loads of others, Nirvana, and then even Dire Straits. You know what I mean? I'd have a bit of Dire Straits.
Great stuff. You mentioned some amazing acts there. And again, I could definitely, when I was listening to the Dead 60s today, The Clash really came through there. I was thinking I can maybe see you picking The Clash. So really interesting. Obviously, I don't know the Fantasy Festival lineup, so I'm just as excited to hear this as what the listeners will be right now. Okay, so 2 o'clock at McManifest, time for your opening act. Your opening act are going to get an hour to play from 2 till 3. So, Matt, who's going to be your opening act at McManifest?
Okay, so just I'll try and keep it as brief as possible because I do have a habit of going off and rambling and going on a tangent. Just before I unveil the first act, I just wanted to give you, if I may, just a quick thing. So this whole idea of I can't even say it myself, McManifest. What I wanted to do was I wanted this whole festival to celebrate a particular genre, or if you like, scene that I was very, very much influenced by in my teenage years. And with the whole COVID thing and all that, you have time to listen to music a lot more, I found. And I never lost my love for this scene or this genre, but I kind of rediscovered it in a weird way because I hadn't listened to some of the acts for quite a long time. So basically every band is one, either from this particular scene, or two, related to this particular scene. Okay? And I hope that's okay, because I did have a bit of a 10-minute nervous breakdown early today. I thought, God, am I allowed to do this? Have a festival that is like all the same bands coming out of the same kind of stable? And I thought, God. And then I thought, you know what? No, it's my fantasy festival. I can do what I want. So this is what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. You're a fan. You said it. You want it. You got it.
So anyway, so sorry, yeah. So like I said, yeah. So they're either from this particular scene or related to this particular scene, and the scene is, I want to celebrate Californian East Bay punk scene.
Love it.
Which is something I was hugely, influenced by in my teenage years. Which was predominantly, it kind of started in the late 1980s, which kind of really came into prominence in the 1990s. So yeah, so the Californian East Bay punk scene is what this whole thing is kind of going to be about. So my first act is a band called Operation Ivy. Now, I am kind of conscious that some of the listeners might be like, who? What? You know what I mean? But if I give you a little small bit of a background to them, so they were formed in California, Berkeley, in 1987, and one of the founding members was Tim Armstrong. Now that name, Tim Armstrong, might ring, ring a bell in people's ears. He was also then, after that band split up, formed Rancid, who were very big on that kind of punk scene. But Operation Ivy they have widely been credited as, well, basically inventing ska punk, the ska punk sound, which was, they would mix elements of punk and ska, hence ska punk. And they were critical, really, to the emergence of Lookout Records, which were an independent record label based in Berkeley, California, that would end up kind of beating all the odds and becoming this huge successful label, basically, that signed and were behind many of the other bands out of the scene that went on to even do bigger and better things than Operation Ivy. But a lot of people consider Operation Ivy one of the first bands to really kickstart this movement. They probably weren't the actual first, but the first one that was like really kind of got people to sort of sit up and listen. So yeah, it was. Oh, and interestingly enough, that name Operation Ivy, which I always think is really cool, the name was derived from an American nuclear weapons test which happened in the 1950s. But yeah, and when I first got into this band, I was probably 12 or 13, that kind of age. And again, they were doing the ska punk sound. Although they're American, if I hadn't got into them, I don't think I'd ever would have got into the Specials and stuff like that. They led me onto the Specials and the more kind of sort of ska bands that people would talk about a bit more than this one.
So so you're 2 years younger than me, so you get into them around 94, 95, give or take, based on your
age. 94.
This is all pre-Spotify and pre-YouTube, so it's not like you've listened to a band and then found it. How did you find them then? Because obviously you must have had to go into a record shop at some point and find them.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine, basically, who kind of lived in my neighbourhood, he had family in America. And he used to regularly travel to America for summer holidays, school holidays, that kind of thing. And we were into the sort of the alternative scene, if you like. And he came back from America one summer saying, "You got to listen to this band."
Right.
Like he had like the CD, and we were like, "What? Who are these? Like, how do you know?" And he goes, "Yeah, there's this scene in California. You know, like my older cousins and my older relatives are talking about it. It's kicking off. You know." And we were like, "Wow!" And he like back then he lent me his CD. And I did the old, the cassette tapes, press play and record, and copied it. And that's how I found out about the scene. And then a little bit later on, I realised there was a record shop, which I believe is still going in Liverpool. It might have changed location, called Probe Records, which sold all that stuff, all the import stuff. Now, we could never afford it because you had to pay these silly prices, but you could get hold of this stuff in this one record store. And then when we could finally, cobble together enough money or beg our parents to give us, a fiver or whatever it was, we would go in and buy these, these Californian punk records.
Brilliant stuff. I love stories like that. So Operation Ivy are opening McManifest. They're going to play from 2 till 3 o'clock. Great opening acts. We're going to take a half-hour break, and then it'll be time for our Super Seconds act, who are also going to get an hour. So, Matt, who are you going to have follow Operation Ivy at McManifest?
Okay, again, this is a band that most people will probably go, "Who are they? What are you talking about?" type thing, unless you're familiar with this with this whole East Bay punk scene. And it's a band called the Mr T Experience.
That's a fantastic name.
I know, isn't it? Isn't it one of the best names? The Mr T Experience. I pity the fool.
That's a great name. So I guess tell us a bit about why the Mr T Experience are your Super Seconds act.
And again, I discovered them through Operation Ivy. They were on this whole scene. They were all both of these bands were signed to Lookout Records, which I've kind of touched on briefly. Basically an independent record label from Berkeley, California, who beat all the odds and kind of got this scene sort of happening. They put their records out there for people to listen to, and again, so it was leading on from Operation Ivy. I heard this name, the Mr T Experience. Now, I hadn't heard any music at this stage. I just heard the name and I was like, "That's for me. I just know I'm going to like this. I just know. What a brilliant name." And again, we'd managed to get hold of a copy of, I can't list off the names of all the records, but they've done maybe like 11, 12, 13 records, something like this. So by the time I'd sort of come of age and got into them, the album was called Revenge is Sweet and So Are You. And interestingly, they've just released a 25-year anniversary edition of it. Now, I never had my own copy back when I was a teenager. Again, I had a cassette tape that I had taped off another fella's tape who had got it off another. So it was like this really dodgy copy. And I couldn't afford the record. It was, at the time, it was something like £20 to buy it on import, that was massive, massive money in the 90s. And yet I've bought the vinyl and I'm just waiting for it to be delivered to the house. And I've waited kind of like 25, 30 years for this. And I've never had my own copy. And I got it in an orange vinyl, remastered, the whole lot, repackaged. It's been 25th anniversary. And so I had to include them because I had to, it's a record that I've gone back to. And the thing about this band is they were kind of like, they sang about, I don't know whether this is that, I don't want to kind of sound like, they didn't really sing about anything too intelligent. They sang about like teenage love songs and stuff like that. But at that age when I got into them, yeah, man, I totally dig that. That was my bag, you know what I mean? But they were kind of like, Beach Boys, pop harmonies, pop melodies with distorted guitars. They were a 3-piece band, guitar, bass, drums, which I personally love. Yeah. I think 3-piece bands are like the coolest. And they just had this whole kind of bubblegum pop punk, just, sugary kind of sound, but was just totally hit the nail on the head and just totally kind of, it just pressed my buttons at the time when I was a teenager. And I just totally digged it.
I love it. I'm looking forward to listening to them, actually. I've not heard of the Mr. T Experience, but I'm looking forward to having a listen to the album. I love it when those bands take you back and make you feel like a teenager again and you re-fall in love with it. And I'm sure you're going to have that experience when the vinyl comes. So I hope that reaches you sooner rather than later then. So the Mr. T Experience, your Super Seconds act, great shout. They're going to play from 3 till 4:30. We'll take one more half-hour break. That takes us to 5 o'clock. And then, Matt, it will be time for your Midway Madness act. So, great first two acts so far, Matt. And who's going to be your Midway Madness act?
Okay, yeah, so the Midway one, kind of just slightly just taking it sort of away from the whole East Bay punk thing. But the artist I'm choosing is a guy called Paul Westerberg.
Oh, mate. Yes.
Yeah. Who I'm kind of a bit obsessed with, and I have been since I ever kind of, discovered him, a good probably 20 years ago when I first kind of found him. And he was the lead singer of The Replacements, which were a band who were I would kind of call them a kind of an alternative garage rock band, something like that. I mean, I absolutely adore the Replacements, and they kind of sort of late 70s to probably early 90s before they disbanded. Now, I think they did reform a couple of times, but he went solo, basically, the lead singer, and he'd done quite a few albums, but it was his third solo album, which is an album called Sugarcane Gratification, which was released in 1999. And when I first discovered that, wow, it just absolutely, just blew me away. It absolutely kind of changed my life in a way. I just, he's kind of a hero of mine, really. And I think his talent as a songwriter is absolutely just up there. And again, I know just at the start of this thing, I was mainly, focusing on this Californian East Bay stuff. Now, although Paul Westerberg / The Replacements, they're not from California, they're from Minneapolis, which I believe, I've actually been to Minneapolis, I've played there, but
wow.
if I remember rightly, it's more close to Chicago than it is to the West Coast, so it's more East Coast. So even though it's not technically sort of this Californian scene that I'm trying to sort of talk about, I know that a lot of these bands who came out of the Californian East Bay punk scene, they would cite Paul Westerberg and The Replacements as a massive influence. And when you kind of sort of do your homework and join the dots, you can totally see it. Like, you can totally see how that influence came into them. And because obviously he was a good few years before that scene kicked off, and you can almost see it just kind of seep through. And like I said, the likes of, like I mentioned, Tim Armstrong there, who was in Operation Ivy, then went on to do Rancid, like the bands like Rancid and stuff like that. They always kind of, would talk about Paul Westerberg as an influence. So I think he was, kind of quite important, really, in the whole thing developing.
Yeah, great shout. I love Paul Westerberg. Go on.
And I will say, that is the slot. That particular album, his third solo album, Sugarcane Gratification, that is the one I'd like to see him do all the way through, start to finish.
Fantastic shout. I'm obviously a big Replacements fan, and Paul Westerberg, I was lucky enough to see The Replacements when they done 2 London dates about 10 years ago, I think it was.
Oh, wow. I'm totally jealous of that.
Yeah, so...
It's so funny because I've been trying to sort of track him down. This might sound a bit mad, but there's a friend of mine who's from America who's also a singer-songwriter, a guy called John Murray. He sort of knows a few people that are connected to him. And I had a conversation with him saying, he's based in Ireland here now, this guy I'm on about. And he goes, yeah, I know people who are connected to Paul Westerberg and would kind of sort of be in the same circles. And I said to him, I really want him to produce my second solo album, Paul Westerberg, this is. And he was like, let's track him down, man, let's track him down. Let's try and throw a few emails out there, let's get on social media. But we haven't managed to do it. I mean, and in fairness now, I haven't really fully sort of committed myself to tracking him down because I'm just, busy. But yeah, we have got this thing where we're like, let's track him down and see if he produced my second album. So,
wow! I wish you luck.
If you're listening, Paul, I'm here. If you're listening, come on, I'm available.
I'm going to see Jesse Marlin. I don't know if you know who Jesse Marlin is. He's like an American.
Love him.
He's playing in the garage in London next month. But his support act is Tommy Stinson, who's obviously the bass player.
Oh, yeah, he was in The Replacements.
Yeah, he's the bass player. So I've made it my mission in that gig to get there as early as I can and meet Tommy Stinson and maybe try and get Tommy on this podcast because he's still obviously doing loads of stuff. So I'll obviously keep you posted.
If you speak to Tommy and he's still in touch with Paul, tell him that your mate Matt here wants to get a message to Paul.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I remember Jesse. I saw Jesse years and years ago. This kind of ties into this whole thing. He was in a band called Degeneration, and I went to see them play in Manchester.
Oh wow!
And when I was was about 14, maybe 15. Yeah. So, yeah.
Incredible. So, great shout. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on the Replacements and Jesse, but obviously this is about getting the rest of your acts down there. But a fantastic third choice. First time Paul Westerberg has been chosen in a fantasy festival. So 3 acts down, 2 acts to go. So your next act, your pre-headline act, we're going to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So Matt, who's going to be your pre-headline act?
Okay, I'm going for the Ramones.
Another great shout.
You know, obviously, yeah, absolutely love that. Just before I kind of talk a bit about these, I would have put the Ramones on as headline, but because obviously the headline slot is 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours, I think they would have to do about 400 songs or something. Do you know what I mean? So I thought, no, put them on before the headline. And you know, the Ramones. What could we say about the Ramones? I absolutely, adore them. For me. And I kind of feel quite strongly about this. I think that the Ramones were the first ever punk rock group ever, and I know that a lot of people would sort of say it's an English thing, the Pistols or whatever like that. But I feel quite strongly that punk was basically stolen by the English and they claimed it as their own. I think it all happened in America first, and even like the New York Dolls and stuff like that. But I think the Ramones were the first one. But yeah, I think it was kind of stolen from the English, and that doesn't really surprise me really, because I'm Irish, do you know what I mean? So I'm kind of well aware of the reputation, shall we say, that the English may have in sort of taking stuff and claiming it their own. So I totally, I totally believe that the English went over and stole it. Malcolm McLaren, whatever you want to call it, but. And I think it is kind of documented that, if I remember right, it's 1974, maybe 1975 was when the Ramones first formed and became a band. I know that first album, the self-titled Ramones album, was 1976. So to me, they were the first, really, And they just kind of kicked the door open for it all. And Dee Ramone in particular, the bass player and songwriter, I just think he's absolutely amazing. He's cool as fuck, you know what I mean? And I would say he's my most favourite bass player ever from the sort of punk world.
Great shout with the Ramones. I think this is the first time the Ramones have been in a fantasy festival as well after 115 episodes. So well done, Matt, for picking them.
I'm doing okay.
You're doing all right. So they're going to play for an hour and a half. We'll take 1.5 hour break. It'll be time for your headline act, who you said get 2.5 hours from 8:30 to 11 o'clock. So Matt, you've a stellar first 4 acts, but who is going to be the headliner of McManifest?
Okay, so again, going back, and I apologise if I'm repeating myself, but this whole idea was to celebrate the Californian East Bay punk scene that I was massively influenced by when I was a teenager, still adore to this day. And my headline act, who I consider to be the kings of the East Bay punk scene, is... It's Green Day.
Great choice, Green Day. I mean, obviously, I think Green Day, you can hear the Replacements' influence in Green Day, especially in very early Green Day as well. Yeah. So I guess tell us about Green Day then, Matt.
Well, again, they were a band that I discovered. It was kind of the sort of the big album, if you like, the Dookie, which came out in 1994. I remember a friend of mine had a copy of it, and I done the old, I'm going to tape that off you on my cassette tape. Yeah. He said, he goes, listen to it, just completely fell in love with it. I mean, I kind of got a bit obsessed with them. And at that time, that whole sound, everything they were doing, what they were singing about, the whole lyrical content, the attitude, the look, I just fell for it. I was like, yeah, this is for me. I can totally, get into this. And around that time was when I was kind of really starting to take serious to play guitar, and I was like trying to learn like traditional Irish songs, which failed miserably because they're really hard. Yeah. And they were definitely really hard back then. Trying to learn Beatles songs, like trying to sit down, trying to play Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds on the acoustic guitar, like I can't do it at all. But when I listened to Green Day, and in particular that album Dookie, I could play all their songs in half an hour. And I was like, this is for me, yeah. I was like, and it just struck a chord with me. I just loved it, the melodic kind of vocal melodies, the abrasive guitars, the harmonies, the drums, everything, the whole sound, it just totally, I was like, yeah, I'm in, sign me up type thing. And then some years later, I've actually met the boys from the band from Green Day quite a few times over the years. But just going back to the Pinhole days, pre-Dead 60s, we supported Green Day in Newcastle. It was Newcastle upon Tyne. Why are you, man? And all that, fuck on the Tyne. They were basically doing this kind of one-off gig in Newcastle. They didn't have a support band, and we had a manager at the time who, long story short, basically put our name forward to their people. They were able to get hold of some of our stuff. I think a CD or possibly a tape even got sent to them just in time. They listened to it and said, yeah, we really like these guys. They invited us on to play with them. Yeah, I was like 18, and so like this band that I'd kind of adored in my teenage years.
Wow.
I got to go and support them. And then kind of fast forward then to the Dead 60s days. We never played with them again, but I'd done festivals that they were on, and I'd seen them a few times and got to speak to them sort of backstage and in the VIP bar and that kind of thing.
I think McManifest, Matt, we've got to put a VIP bar into McManifest just for you.
Oh, definitely.
Your own
definitely,
bar.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. But yeah, they just, they were a huge influence on me. They kind of made me feel like I could play music as well, because, everything they were doing sort of I could relate to, and the fact that I found it sort of easy to do that style of music, it just boosts your confidence, you know what I mean? And when you see this band go big, like that time when we played with them, they were doing, 15,000 capacities. So like they were, and you see this kind of like simple sort of 3-chord pop punk trick going massive. It's just amazing, yeah. So they were definitely a huge influence, and I still love them to this day. I think they're brilliant, and I would if they came round here anytime soon playing a gig, or I say a gig now, they'd be playing a huge, stadium or whatever. I'd definitely love to go see them play again.
Great shout. Only the second time Green Day have been picked for a fantasy festival, so the rest of your 4 acts have never been picked before, and Green Day only the second pick, but a fantastic headliner. They're going to be great at McManifest. And at 11 o'clock, they welcome back on stage the Ramones, Paul Westerberg, the Mr T Experience, and Operation Ivy. Mate, you've got an amazing stage full of the best of pop punk that there's ever been, and I guess we can bring out the Dead 60s again to play along as well. Get Dead 60s out.
Yeah.
Maybe even the first band who came before that will get out. Maybe even get out Pinhole as well to come and play with them. So you've got all this talent. They get to play one song to end McManifest. What song are you going to have them all play together?
Okay, so I'm going to pick London Calling by The Clash.
Great stuff. So you didn't get them into your lineup, but you are representing The Clash in your encore.
Yeah, exactly. They kind of, they were there, there or thereabouts, even though, they didn't actually make the full lineup. But yeah, we have to get a Clash song in because, they're simply an amazing band.
I love it. I love what you've done there. So an amazing fantasy festival lineup. So let's lock it in, confirm it before anyone changes their mind. So we've got McManifest taking place in Mulrenny in County Mayo. Open act got Operation Ivy. Super Second's got the Mr T Experience. Midway Man has got Paul Westerberg, and he's going to play his third solo album for Suicane Gratification, yeah. Ramones are your pre-headline act. Green Day headlining, and for your encore, all 5 are going to play London Calling. Matt, sounds amazing to me. You happy to lock that one into the Fantastival Vaults?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to lock that in. Yeah, let's do
it. Fantastic. So before we finish this podcast, Matt, let's recap the next few months. We've mentioned live dates. You've obviously mentioned a second album potentially. What does, I guess, 2023 hold for you, Matt?
Yeah, well, again, just kind of going to do as much sort of live performance as possible leading up to the full band show. I am actually going into the studio in 2 weeks, which I'm going to do an EP, which I'm not going to say too much about because there is a slight concept to it, and I don't want to kind of sort of, let the cat out the bag right now. But yeah, I'm booked into the studio to start recording. There's definitely going to be a four-track EP, which is kind of going to bridge the gap to the second album. I actually want to do the second album right now, but due to sort of financial constraints, shall we say, it's not quite going to happen just yet because I can't get in for the full amount of time I want to do that I need to do the second album. So we're going to do this EP to bridge the gap. And as soon as that's kind of done, we're going to get it out there. And then I'd say towards the end of 2023, I'll start recording the second album. I mean, I'd love to get it out this year. But like I said, if due to sort of financial, issues, stuff like that, it might not happen this year. But hopefully the stars will align and we'll get it out. But yeah, there's plenty of music coming. And, I've already started writing the third album. I know that's might sound a bit weird because I haven't actually recorded the second album or put it out, but I've already started working on the third album. So there's plenty of stuff there. There's plenty of new music that's going to be coming out very, very soon. And yeah, just sort of going to try and keep up as much live performance as possible.
Fantastic. Sounds really exciting. And if people want to listen to what's currently out there, they can do so on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever people go to get their music and find it.
All the main streaming services, it's all out there, yeah.
And let's give you socials one more plugged in. So if anyone doesn't follow you, Matt, and wants to follow you, you can be found on Twitter, Insta, Facebook.
Yeah, Twitter, Insta and Facebook, they're the three kind of ones that I basically use. On Facebook, Matt McManamon Music, Instagram, Matt McManamon, and Twitter, Matt McManamon Music.
And
I think, it might be Matt McManamon. It's one of them, you'll find it anyway. Just type in a load of M's and it'll all come up.
And like you said, stock is fairly low, Scally folks. So if people are listening and want to get their hands on a physical copy, they can do so. Bandcamp's the best place to go as well, right? If they want the physical Scally folks.
Yeah, Bandcamp, because I mean, that really does help the artists, as in, people don't, kind of skim off the top, the artists get the money and all that kind of stuff. So it's a great way to kind of keep the ball rolling, do you know what I mean? And keep a few dollars coming in so we can finance the next adventure.
Love it. Great stuff. So that is it, everyone. Thanks for listening to the 116th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. If you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe, give the podcast a review on iTunes, or rate the show if you can on Spotify. It really does help. Matt's on socials, so are we. We are on Twitter. You can find us at FantastivalP, or you can give us an email at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com, because it'd be great to hear from you. And like I say every week, we don't play music on this podcast, but I'll get some tracks from Matt from his chosen acts. We'll make a nice little Spotify playlist up. So if anyone wants to listen to the Mr. T Experience or Operation Ivy or Westerberg or the Ramones, or even listen to a bit of Dead 60s, then we'll get a nice little playlist together, and that'll be in the episode description. So just scroll down from what you're listening to now on, and you'll see a nice little link there for a Spotify playlist. So go and give that a listen. So Matt, you've been an amazing guest, mate. I've loved talking to you. I'm so excited to see what the future holds for you, and it was so great to hear you talk about Dead 60s and the specials. We could have had literally a 10-hour podcast, so it could have gone on much longer. But Matt, how have you found it, mate? Because this is all about you, and how have you found the podcast?
Oh, great, yeah, lovely. And like I know we were saying earlier before we kind of sort of, press records or whatever, I think it's a really great concept, the whole sort of, your festival and all that kind of thing. I love it. It's great. Yeah, so it's been brilliant. Thank you for having me.
Been a pleasure. Like I said, I look forward to seeing where 2023 takes you, and listening, and maybe even seeing you live, hopefully, very soon. So that is it then. I'll be back next week with episode number 117. So please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.